Hello, everybody. Welcome to Cryptids and Critters Paranormal. I'm your host, the Deuster. I've got a little historical event I want to relate to you today. This is an article I wrote for the Robertson County Times back several years ago, and it involved the murder of our sheriff, J. Mart Murphy, in 1931. It is kind of lengthy. My throat is a little bit scratchy this morning, so if you don't mind, kind of bear with me, and I'm going to try to read through this. I call this one a Murder in Tin Cup Alley. Tin Cup Alley. That's what it was called back then. The street later became known as 19th Avenue East, and it ran between Park Street and Woodland Street in Springfield. At one time, it had a nasty reputation of being a rough section of town, an area you didn't want to find yourself in, especially after sundown. The date was Monday, July 20th, 1931. 44-year-old Sheriff Joseph Mart Murphy, simply known as J. Mart to his many friends, had just gotten up from his desk and walked to the door when the phone rang. Ready to call it a day and spend a quiet evening with his wife and son, he hesitated a few seconds before answering. Picking up the receiver, he encountered a shaky and quivering voice, informing him that a violent domestic dispute in Tin Cup Alley at Everett Holliday's residence. The caller told of seeing a woman, later identified as Holloway's wife, running down the street screaming and bleeding, and appeared to have been either shot, beaten, or cut with a knife. Wasting no time, Sheriff Murphy ran to his 1929 DeSoto and sped across town, stopping only to pick up Constable Sam Martin to assist him. He had no idea what or who he was up against and took Martin with him as his backup. As they turned into the alley from Woodland Street, Everett Holloway was sitting on his front porch, and when he saw the familiar yellow DeSoto, he bolted into the house. Sheriff Murphy, followed by Martin, exited the car and ran up to the house, and finding the front door locked. Martin remained at the front door while Sheriff Murphy went around to the back door. After climbing the rickety wooden steps, Sheriff Murphy took his foot and pushed the door open. Holloway was waiting. From 6 feet away, Holloway fired a blast from his single-barrel 12-gauge shotgun, hitting the sheriff in the left side of the abdomen. The blast knocked the sheriff backwards off the steps and into the backyard. His pistol never left his holster. Constable Sam Martin was still on the front porch when he heard the blast. He immediately drew his revolver, kicked open the front door, and cautiously entered the house. Quickly checking each room, it appeared unoccupied as he cautiously made his way to the back door, where he found Sheriff Murphy bleeding profusely and lying in the backyard. An ambulance was summoned, and several neighbors ran over to offer their assistance. Holloway was still at large and possibly armed, but the local residents put all thoughts of their own personal safety aside to assist the fallen officer. Excuse me. Strangely, no one had seen Holloway leave the house. Meanwhile, Holloway listened to all the excitement from his hiding place beneath his bed, the still smoking gun laying on the floor beside him. About 5 minutes later, he quietly crawled from beneath the bed and tiptoed to the open front door. Fearing the police were swarming all over the yard, he raised his hands high in the air as he walked out onto the porch. He was surprised to find the front yard empty, and taking advantage of the situation, bolted across the yard and into the street. An observant Sam Martin spotted him next to the curb, where he was apprehended, handcuffed, and arrested. Martin then went back into the house, recovered the shotgun, with the spent shell still in the chamber, and transported Holloway and the evidence to the Robertson County Jail. After turning his prisoner over to the jailer, Martin had the grim task of notifying the family. The sheriff's brother, Deputy Claude Murphy had just left his brother at the jail only moments before the fateful phone call came in. He had gone straight home and was in the act of eating supper with his family when the phone rang. His wife answered the call, her face growing pale. With a quivering, broken voice, she told Claude the dreadful news of the shooting. Speeding through town, he soon arrived at the grisly scene. Dr. W. W. Porter was already on the scene, attending the massive wound, while Miss Fanny Chilton held the sheriff's head in her lap, wiping the sweat from his brow. By this time, a large crowd had gathered in the backyard, some waiting to help, others just rubbernecking, wanting to see some blood and gore. The wounded sheriff was loaded into the ambulance, and with Claude and Dr. Porter attending to the wounded sheriff, immediately started the long trip to Nashville. Springfield at that time had no hospital or any type of emergency medical services as we do today, and the ambulances were actually hearses ran by the funeral homes, equipped with only a first aid kit. The speeding ambulance, driven by Jim Ragland, weaved in and out of the traffic on the narrow two-lane roads, escorted by Springfield motorcycle officer J.J. Lester. On the way to the hospital, Sheriff Murphy repeatedly told Claude that he was dying. He informed him of his insurance policy, the amount the county owed him, and how much the government owed him, but more importantly, to take care of his wife Lucy and his 3-year-old son Billy Mart. He repeated this several times, sometimes hard to hear over the wail of the siren. The trip to St. Thomas was made in record 40 minutes, but the sheriff had lost too much blood and needed transfusion immediately. Ambulance driver Jim Ragland donated his blood to the sheriff in an attempt to save his friend's life. Meanwhile, back in Springfield, a crowd of over 200 people had gathered outside the jail. Resentment against Holloway was high, and when the news came back from Nashville stating the sheriff was still alive, the crowd quietly dispersed for the night. While Claude stayed at the hospital with Sheriff Murphy, two of their brothers, James and Robert, kept a vigil outside the jail. News of the shooting had spread across the county like wildfire. A sacred trust had been violated, and the citizens of Robertson County had a history of taking the law into their own hands and administering vigilante justice at the end of a rope. The next morning, the number of citizens standing outside the jail quickly grew to over 500, and rumors of a lynching were rampant throughout the crowd. Circuit Court Judge J.D. Morton, from the safety of the courthouse, was keeping an eye on the situation at the jail. He remembered back 30 years ago when a young White Mallory was lynched off the courthouse balcony, as well as the lynching and the LaPrade murder several years before that. He swore this would not happen again and ordered the state militia to transport Holloway to Nashville for his own safety. The state militia arrived about 3 that afternoon, consisting of 12 men commanded by Major Robertson. They wore civilian clothes and were armed only with small caliber arms. When the detachment reached the jail, James Murphy met Major Robertson on the bottom step. "Major, I can't keep you from getting the man, but when you come down these steps, you or I is going to die. I don't care if you do have an order from the governor. There's only one man that can order the removal of Holloway from this jail, and that's the sheriff of Robertson County." Seeing the gravity of the situation, Major Robertson immediately withdrew his men and made a beeline for the courthouse, conferring with County Judge Byron Johnson. The decision was made to order an additional detachment. Robinson again returned to the jail and proposed that he station his men outside the jail, letting no one inside but deputies. He gave his word of honor that he would not take Holloway away. James agreed, but as the detachment entered the jail, Robinson ordered his men, If that mob comes near, shoot, and shoot to kill." To this James replied, "Every man has one time to die, and now is as good a time as ever. You'll take Holloway only over my dead body." Mr. George Murphy, their father, tried to persuade them to let the officers take care of the situation, but they paid him no mind. Around 8:20 that evening, the 2nd Detachment, the 117th Infantry of the National Guard, commanded by Captain Roy Jones, arrived in Springfield and consisted of 40 uniformed, heavily armed men. The crowd outside the jail continued to grow with each passing minute. Upon the arrival of the larger detachment, James and Robert were placed under guard inside the jail. The crowd outside rushed the jail, only to be driven back with rifles and bayonets. 2 machine guns were immediately mounted at the entrance to the jail with standing orders to shoot to kill. Inside the jail, with James and Robert unable to warn the others of what was about to happen, Holloway was fitted into a National Guard uniform. Moments later, 6 uniformed soldiers walked down the jail steps, got in a car, and sped off to Nashville. It was not until several minutes later that it was discovered that Holloway had been one of the 6. With Holloway on his way to Nashville, and with their mission completed, the troops loaded up and left Springfield. The bloodthirsty and disappointed crowd outside the jail quietly dispersed. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Sheriff Murphy was receiving his 2nd blood transfusion, this time from his close friend, Ben Dozier. His situation was growing more critical by the hour, and his prognosis was not looking good. The following morning, Wednesday, July 22nd, Sheriff Murphy developed bronchopneumonia, and the doctors gave him only a slight chance of recovery. Family members remained at his bedside around the clock. It was ironic. While Sheriff Murphy fought for his life on one end of Nashville, Holloway was safe and protected in his cell on the other. On July 24th, 1931, Sheriff Murphy passed away at St. Thomas Hospital in Nashville, leaving a widow and a 3-year-old son. On Friday, funeral services were held at the First Methodist Church in Springfield. Reverend S.M. Ensor, pastor of the New Chapel Church, assisted by other pastors in the county, delivered the eulogy. Sheriff Murphy had been a member of New Chapel Church since childhood. Springfield Mayor C.H. Rickman issued a proclamation that all businesses closed between 4 and 5 that evening in tribute to the slain officer. The burial followed in Elmwood Cemetery, where more than 5,000 citizens paid their last respects. J. Mart's brothers, James, Robert, Claude, and Otto, along with Deputy Ernest Dillard, served as the pallbearers. Pursuant to state guidelines, County Coroner Allen L. Jett filled in the position of sheriff until the county commissioners could meet and appoint a sheriff to fill the unexpired term. The following Monday, County Court Clerk Earl Farmer called a special session to convene the following Thursday for the purpose of electing a sheriff. The person appointed would serve until September of 1932, that being the day that the next duly elected sheriff would take office. In an unprecedented turn of events, Mrs. Lucy Murphy, the sheriff's widow, announced that she would accept the sheriff's duties if the commissioner saw fit to appoint her. The Robertson County Times endorsed her for this position. Everyone, or almost everyone, favored her, and it seemed she would be appointed with no opposition. This seemed to be the course that everyone was in favor of, but as usual, the political wheels rotated in their own direction. Interest in the outcome was high, and the courtroom was filled to capacity. At the last minute, former sheriff and coroner Allen Jett was nominated, and as usual, "You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours philosophy prevailed among the magistrates. Miss Murphy lost to Jett by a mere 3 votes, 21 to 19 in favor of Jett. Jett immediately resigned his position as coroner and assumed his new duties as a sheriff. On Friday, October 9th, 1931, the grand jury returned an indictment against Holloway for murder in the first degree in the death of Sheriff J. Mart Murphy. On Thursday, October 15th, 1931, Holloway was arraigned before Judge J.D. Morton and entered a plea of not guilty. The jury selection began, and the following were selected and seated. I'm not going to read their names. That evening, the jury was sequestered under the charge of Officer Ernest Dillard and E.C. Fry. Holloway's attorneys were A.L. Dorsey and John D. Sprouse. The prosecution was conducted by Attorney General W.C. Howell, assisted by Charles Willett, and the law office of Gardner and O'Brien. The trial got underway that afternoon. The following morning, Friday, October 16th, the trial resumed and continued throughout the day. Holliday contended that Sheriff Murphy pulled his pistol on him, and he shot in self-defense. He also stated that Sheriff Murphy had threatened to kill him on an earlier date. Several witnesses stated otherwise, that Holloway had threatened to kill the sheriff the next time he attempted to arrest him. And so it went back and forth throughout the day. And at the close of court that evening, the jury was again sequestered in charge of their sworn officers. Saturday morning, October 17th, after hearing all the argument and proof from both the prosecution and defense, the jury was charged by the court, then retired to the jury room to consider the verdict. The jury deliberated over the weekend, both Saturday and Sunday. On Monday, October 19th, before a packed courtroom, the jury returned and announced they had reached a verdict, finding Holloway guilty of murder in the first degree. The jury further assessed punishment at death by electrocution. Holloway's attorneys then moved the court for a new trial. After considering the motion, the defense was given until October 24th to file their reasons that would warrant a new trial. Judge Morton then set the execution date for November 9th through the 13th of 1931. On Saturday, October 24th, Holloway's attorneys filed a bill of over 35 exceptions to support the motion for a new trial. The hearing was set for the following Wednesday. On that Wednesday, the motion for a new trial was overruled, whereby Holloway's attorneys moved for an arrest of judgment, which was also overruled. The case was then appealed to the Tennessee Supreme Court. On June 4th, 1932, the Supreme Court at Nashville affirmed the conviction, but recommended the governor commute the sentence from death to life imprisonment. The execution date was set for July 15th in case the governor refused to commute the sentence. On June 8th, Tennessee Governor Henry Horton commuted the sentence from death to life imprisonment, and Holloway began serving his life sentence on June 10th, 1932, at the Tennessee State Prison in Nashville. Holloway applied for parole several times over the years, but was denied on each application. As early as February 1933, a petition was circulating around the county asking for the pardon of Holloway, citing his 72-year-old mother needed his support and protection. The petition failed, and Holloway remained in prison. It was not until April 27, 1950, that the parole board recommended parole. Holloway was pardoned on May 15, 1950, and resided in Nashville through November of 1951. Mrs. Lucy Murphy raised her son in Springfield and died on April 18, 1972, just 2 months shy of her 82nd birthday. She was laid to rest beside her husband in Springfield's Elmwood Cemetery. In 1950, the same year Holloway was paroled, J. Mart's brother, Otto Murphy, was elected as sheriff of Robertson County. Otto was reelected in 1952 and again in 1954, serving through August of 1956. Little Billy Mart Murphy grew up in Springfield and passed away in December of 2005. He lived his life as a tribute to his father, the only sheriff of Robertson County, Tennessee, to be killed in the line of duty. I dedicate this to the memory of Sheriff Joseph Mart Murphy. September 24th, 1886, end of watch, July 24th, 1931. Rest in peace, J. Mart. Hope you enjoyed this. Subscribe to my channel, like it every once in a while, and come back and we'll do some more of these historical accounts. Again, this is the Dooster, Cryptids and Critters Paranormal. Thank you for watching, and we'll catch you later.